evening. Welcome to Stone and Chalk. I'm Michael Bromley. I am the host for tonight, and as I said before, resident tormentor of your panel. We're going to have some fun talking about AI, automation, machine learning, and whatever else these guys want to talk about that's related. Before we go, though, quickly, I want to introduce myself. I'm Michael Bromley. I'm the CEO of Stone and Chalk. And for those of you in the back rows, I say this every time, I am more likely to pick you out of the lineup and make you do things because you decided to hide back there. You have two choices. You can come forward, be part of the show, or you can stay back there and be a big part of the show. All your choice. We'll leave it at that, and we'll turn our heads away from you and let you make your decision. Before we go any further, though, I would like to acknowledge where we are and who we are. I want to acknowledge the custodians of this land. I want to acknowledge and pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. We extend the respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people. And if anybody is attending today, welcome and thank you. I want to talk a little bit about Stone and Chalk for just a second. How many people don't know who we are? We'll do this quick then. That's okay. That's all right. I mean, people have to live under rocks somewhere. No, that's all right. So Stone and Chalk, we like to describe ourselves as the largest innovation community in Australia. We have about 600 companies we work with, about 6,000 people involved in those companies and are part of emerging technology in some way, shape, or form. Our job is to help transform Australia into a sustainable, technology-driven economy. We should stop digging up coal and putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and start powering our country based on something that's completely renewable, ideas and people. Free, easy, and renewable. What could be better? It's a way to sustain our economy from an ecological point of view and from an economical point of view. So that's what we're all about. We have innovation hubs like the one you're in today in Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. In fact, we have two in Sydney. We have a scale-up hub dedicated to larger, more mature startups because the needs change. We're looking to expand all of those capabilities to other states and other cities as well. So, or think of some place you think we should be, and there's a big emerging tech community, let us know. We'd love to talk to the right people there and see if we can talk about getting in. We are about to show you some brand new content, something that has never before been seen by anybody who doesn't have a Stone and Chalk t-shirt on tonight, other than me. We put together a little bit of an intro. For those of you who don't know us, this should hopefully tell you a little bit more about us. And for those of you who do, hopefully this will give you an idea of the new direction that we've been taking for the last 6 or 10 months. So why don't we roll that?
Starts with a big idea, where relentless bravery and curiosity reside. Ideas that are driving real change, purpose-driven growth, and positive impact. Where brilliant minds and passionate entrepreneurialism converge, and deep human connections form. At Stone and Chalk, we are founder first, sustainable, not-for-profit, and Australia-wide. With the visionaries, the creators, the brave and the bold, our startups, scale-ups and corporates don't just make moves in the industry. Together, we're putting Australian emerging tech innovation on the map. To succeed, real change makers need more than just guidance and networks. They need to be supported every step of their journey by a curated community of founders, mentors, investors, corporates, governments, and collaborators. Together, we're redefining how innovation should be supported in order to thrive. It all starts with your big idea. Join the next gen of change makers and make your mark with the largest innovation community in Australia. At Stone and Chalk, together we ideate, innovate, impact.
So that's a little bit about us. Yes. Thank you. Actually, if you want to thank somebody, Dee, give a wave. This is Dee, runs our marketing and communications group, and was the brainchild behind all of what you just saw, and our entire new brand, in fact. So if you like purple, great. If you don't, well, too bad. We're purple now. Talk a little bit about why we're here. We're here to talk about artificial intelligence, and there's probably a lot of undertones behind what that actually is and what goes into making artificial intelligence, but we'll get into that. We're here to talk about how AI will impact our lives in the future, but also how it's already impacting our lives today. And maybe in some ways you might not even know of already, but it will be impacting a lot in the next few years that will make a change to the economy, to how we live our lives, to how you run your business, to how your businesses are funded and how they succeed in the future. So let me give you my favorite example of the way artificial intelligence is already changing the world. And then we'll get into talking to our esteemed panel. And let's not forget we have Anthony on the line as well. But before we introduce them, I want to talk to you a little bit about Rembrandt. You probably know the artist I'm talking about, Rembrandt, right? Dutch painter, everybody's favorite neo-Renaissance painter. Let's talk about the newest Rembrandt. Has anybody seen the new Rembrandt painting? Is anybody surprised by a man who's dead 350 years ago is painting again? Because he is. And it's pretty spectacular. In 2016, a group of data scientists, machine learning, and AI experts got together with a bunch of art historians to catalog every painting, brushstroke by brushstroke, that Rembrandt ever painted. They calculated color, density, depth, length, texture. They cataloged the faces, the clothing, the backgrounds, the style and the stroke that was used to paint every image that Rembrandt ever painted. They spent 18 months doing that, and they fed that into an AI. And they connected that AI into a 3D printer, which then proceeded to paint a brand new and original, authentic Rembrandt self-portrait. That was 6 years ago. Think about what that meant. That meant that somebody could paint without arms, without legs, without eyes. That meant that we could recreate an historic work of art that art historians could not tell from an original. And that got distributed throughout the world. It went on tour in 2016. 6 years ago, that's what AI could do. Now, when we talk about AI, we often talk about people losing jobs or sentience or crazy ideas of Steven Spielberg and other movie producers who create horror movies about the dystopian future that AI is going to create. Nobody ever talks about the beauty and the art and the refinement that AI can help us create. Nobody talks about the fact that somebody who has an incredible creative mind but doesn't have the dexterity in their hands to paint can now paint. Unlocking hidden talent or broken talent and creating beauty that the world has never seen. That's the power of AI in my book. That's the power 6 years ago. Let's talk about the power today and the power in the future. So, joining me today to talk about all that, I've got 4 people who are more than qualified to have some really exciting experiences. Oh, there we go. Have them in order. Jeff Feldman, founder and chief technology at Arden Street Labs. Say hello, Jeff.
Hey.
You didn't say hello, Jeff. Oh, all right. And Fee Milne, ML, AI, and data science expert, ex-LinkTree, and all-around big brain, really. That's what we're talking about here. A lot of gray matter, not just on her hair, but inside, too. That's not right. That's not gray. That's not fair. And on the phone or online, we have Anthony Murfett, head of Division for Technology and National Security at the Department of Industry, Science, and Resources, sometimes known as DICER or DISER. Anthony, how are you today? Good to see you again.
Great to be able to beam in.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. And Tracy Moore, GM for Data Strategy, Evangelism, and Governance at Xero. Welcome, everybody. A little round of applause for our panel. So we're going to start out with a general question. Can you each share with the audience an example of how AI and ML are impacting our lives right now? And don't say Rembrandt. Who wants to go first?
I can go since I've got the mic and I can steal all the answers before other people get to them. I thought for my answer, maybe a little bit of audience participation would be fun.
Start with the folks in the back.
Yeah, okay. Since I've got a clean slate, yeah, maybe can some people just put up their hands? I just want to ask them a couple of questions. They're really like non-offensive, easy to answer. Yes, thank you. I've got one. How did you find out about tonight? Okay. And how did you get here tonight? Okay.
I suppose we used Google Maps.
Okay. So, yeah, fair enough. You didn't find out about it through ML, but you found out how to get here maybe through some ML. But yeah, I'm sure lots of you found out about this event via LinkedIn, and that's all curated content, and that's all recommender systems that are built off ML and AI. And yeah, any kind of Google Maps smarts that got you here, that's all powered by ML AI. So essentially how it's impacting our daily lives, we're all here today because of it.
Excellent. Great answer. Thank you, Pete.
I thought I might try and give two answers to that question, because the world of AI discussion is so full of hype. I thought I might try and give an example of an application of AI that makes me sad, and an application of AI that gives me hope for the future of humanity and society. So the application that makes me sad is all of the effort of the people and the companies and the dollars and the investment that goes into trying to change behavior online. So think about advertising, think about social media, think about trying to change elections. Those applications of AI make me sad because they're really driven by who has the most money, who has the agenda, and we as citizens don't often win. On the flip side, an example of an AI application that does give me hope for the future is by a company called Deepmind. So some of you might have heard recently about AlphaGo. So this was the AI system that beat the world's best Go player, and this was thought to be impossible for a long time. The system that was originally built to play Go has recently been extended and augmented, and it won a biology competition. So those of you have probably heard of the journal called Nature, which is the kind of most respected biological research journal. So the front page of Nature last year was held by AlphaFold, which is an AI application that figured out how the protein structures are folded based on their DNA sequence. And this is a problem that scientists had been working on for more than 50 years. And what happened after this breakthrough is whole new streams of research into everything from COVID to Alzheimer's and everything in between. So when AI is used for the power of good, it can be pretty impressive. So yeah, I encourage us all to work on those applications.
Absolutely. I was going to go to you, Anthony, but too good a segue with the discussion of COVID into Jeff and Arden Labs.
I was going to provide a bit of an example that's outside of healthcare. In terms
Ruined
of
my segue.
Sorry, I know. For me, AI is a bit of an interesting one because I feel as though it's overhyped, it's overly used, it's nondescript. It just means a lot of things to everybody and a lot of things to nobody, and it's really hard to pin down. For me, I'm a huge sort of passionate fan of computer vision and techniques within the field of AI, I guess. And so one of the areas that's quite tangible are things like adaptive cruise control, or my smart doorbell at home, where it alerts me if there's a person at the door. So these are very practical and tangible examples where you've got a computer interpreting the world around you, and especially adaptive cruise control, it still blows my mind, that it's able to identify the distance to the car in front of you, the speed of that car, adjust your speed, understand if you're going to crash or if you're not going to crash. There's a number of different features related to it that are really quite clever, but that's probably the one that comes to mind in terms of something that's quite practical and quite tangible, that has, it's not life-altering, but it certainly makes me be a bit lazier when I'm driving. I don't know if that's...
My favorite part of adaptive cruise control is when you're stuck behind that slow person and you suddenly pull out into the next lane, it automatically speeds you up. Love that part.
Yeah, where you realize you're behind the slow person and they're doing 85 and 100, and you've been behind them for now half an hour, not realizing that you've been doing 85 the whole time. So yeah. You
should occasionally look at the road, but we'll talk about that later. Anthony, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Picking up on some of the themes, AI is something to someone and nothing to everyone, and trying to demystify what it is. So I thought I'd just highlight 3 examples that I've come across to show the different ways that AI is being used, and actually the term of AI has been utilised, and then there's probably a discussion later about, well, how do we help demystify so the broader community can understand. So there's one that I've come across called the Purple Hive Project, and it's all about our honeybees. And I think everyone in the audience will know that if honeybees stopped to exist, our food supply would quickly also halt. So what this technology does is, through solar-powered hives, they're able to use artificial intelligence to scan each of the bees that come into a hive and detect whether it's got a particular mite that can kill the bees and cause an infection. So that's just one example of looking at our food system and understanding how we can look after things such as bees so we continue to have food supply. At another extreme, and this is a little bit with my background when I was in the space agency, but again, we use a lot of data from space and from sensors to support bushfire. Data 61 through CSIRO has a project called Spark, which is about analysing the data to predict the spread of bushfire. So again, looking at safety, how can we go about using AI in that context to understand where that bushfire spread could be and protect both people and property. And then turning to places such as Kakadu and working with our Indigenous communities, there's also a partnership underway called the Healthy Country AI Partnership in Kakadu National Park. And again, similar to what I was talking about with the Spark program, it's about taking drone footage, looking at Kakadu and understanding where there are sensitive areas and working with Indigenous communities to ensure that we're identifying where those sensitive areas are, both wildlife as well as fauna and flora. Again, that's another way that we can use the good of AI, and again, the different ways that it can apply.
I warned you. And I'm going to go off script here, guys, so be ready. We've been talking here about all the things that AI can do for us and has done for us, and maybe we'll get into some of the things it will do for us. Raise your hand if you know what AI is.
We're very keen on AI. AI is a cultural practice. It's a moment when you feel like you concede critical decision-making capabilities to an autonomous system that is in some kind of feedback loop that makes choices beyond what the human can maybe follow every single time.
Yeah, round of applause for that. That was pretty good. Now, honestly speaking, how many people in this room could have given an answer that good? Half as good? Yeah, well done. I picked the right person eventually. Sorry. But he got you off the hook, so I was going to come back to you. So it's really important to understand what we're talking about when we talk about the future of something and the present of something. And I think it's a really good context for us to set. There's a lot of mythology and there's a lot of hype, as Jeff said, about what AI is and what AI could be. And this isn't about robots ruling the world yet. But at some point in time, it is about, I think the description was great, ceding some decision-making over to an autonomous system. I think that's a fantastic way of describing that. So with that context, first, Jeff, do you agree?
No, maybe. So I think, and I'll go back to what I do professionally, so we're deep in the healthcare space. We're one of Australia's largest virtual care providers, and we embed AI into everything we do, but it is not replacing clinical decisions. So we've implemented a number of AI capabilities across our suite of software that help the doctors and clinical teams prioritize or better understand the situation of a patient so that they can make a clinical decision and assessment of what needs to happen, but not necessarily making that decision on behalf of the doctor themselves. And as an example, I'm a computer vision guy, so bear with me for a second, is in the world of COVID, as Michael had mentioned before, our software is being used to manage and monitor most, if not all, of the COVID patients here in Victoria. And most patients are reasonably well, feeling a bit crook, but don't need clinical intervention. There's a very small percentage of patients who may require intervention and report shortness of breath or difficulty breathing or passed out or something along those lines. And in addition to the patient self-reporting that I've got severe shortness of breath, we also then conduct a virtual Roth score. And what that entails is the patient counts to 30 over their phone, and we take that audio recording and then using computer vision techniques, analyze that audio recording to detect things like deep breaths or pauses or coughs. Because anybody with normal lung function can count to 30 as quickly as you can without taking a breath. So this then helps the clinician understand that there's a piece of data that the patient says, yes, I'm having trouble breathing, and also provides a bit of quantitative information as to, is that patient experiencing significant lung function degradation, and then helps prioritize that patient with respect to clinical follow-up. So it's not augmenting or replacing the decision by the clinician, but rather helping provide additional information so that when you've got a team of 5 doctors looking after 1,000 patients, they know who they need to call first and who they need to call second and so forth.
Awesome. Thank you. Anthony, don't want you to hang out there bored too long. So, should we be optimistic about AI and the economic benefits it creates, or should we be worried about the jobs it takes?
So I think, from my perspective, yes, I think we should be excited about the opportunity, but I do want to reflect on the panel as well and your earlier comments, Michael, that firstly, we need to manage the hype and understand what it is. We need to understand the sentiment of the community and think about how we do no harm, and that has the role of ethics and principles around AI, and then it's also around demystifying so we understand what it is and how we use it. So I think it's multifaceted, but if we get that right, there is a tremendous opportunity in AI. And many people have seen some of these statistics, $20 trillion to the global economy by 2030, and in Australia alone by 2028, 315 billion. And the reason I think there's this great opportunity is it's a horizontal technology that we can apply across multiple other sectors, whether it's looking at new algorithms or ways to understand clean technologies about how can we be quickly charge batteries. Is it at looking at how do we support decision making in medicine? And I think drawing on that example about the definition of decision making, it's some of the advantages are if we've got an unknown disease, one of the things that AI can do is scan a whole lot of literature and come up with a short list about what it could be, but then there's human intervention both from a care perspective and making the judgment about what the prognosis or disease diagnosis could be. So I think lots of opportunity there, but very mindful that even this morning in the media, we're hearing stories about the threat of AI to jobs. So I think there's a lot of work that we have to do to continue to explain the opportunity that's there. How do we help people understand the technologies, and those that where there might be jobs that are going to rely on AI in the future, how do we help them understand the technologies and reskill? I think that all becomes really important. And I think from what we're seeing too from the government is that's why they're investing $15 billion in National Reconstruction Fund. And this is with one of the areas being critical technologies, and that's quantum AI and robotics, because of that opportunity that's there as we move away from a resource-based economy into a knowledge-based economy. We want to be able to do things smarter and more effective. But again, the social license piece, I think, becomes really important, particularly as it relates to AI.
Thank you. That raises the question that seems to always come up when we talk about AI, more than any other new tech that I can remember, which is ethics. And perhaps we should have thought about it more from some of the old tech as well. Sophie, ethical application of AI and automation, I think they're inextricably linked in this case. Obviously a big challenge, and a bigger challenge when it's an emerging technology at the same time. And we're trying to fix the engine while it's flying, the old saying. What do you think about regulations, ethics, and how, as Anthony said, we have to be careful with this emerging technology? How do we do that? Is there a role for regulation in that? What is that? What are the ethics? What are the consequences? Let's talk about that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely agree. We are trying to build the plane as we fly. And yeah, that's because essentially you don't know what you don't know. And that's why tech, in particular AI or machine learning, it's always a few steps at minimum ahead of regulation. And yeah, things can go wrong really quickly at scale. So take, for example, Trump getting into power. Like if Facebook was maybe a little bit more regulated, a little bit more ethical, I think that political landscape would look a lot better, and no one could have predicted that, or at least not your everyday person. So yes, I agree that we are building the plane as we fly. I don't agree that regulation will strangle development. I know that there's a lot of fear around regulation pushing the development of AI and machine learning to other countries that might not be regulated. But at the end of the day, regulation is hard to enforce, especially when it comes to our industry. Like there might be regulation there, but to enforce it, only really comes when stuff goes wrong. And I think even if the development was to move overseas, the regulation would ensure that your safety is tied to the country that you're in and the end user that is impacted in the country that they're in. And to be honest, regulation, it might not even be required. We can probably utilize a lot of our standard legislation, e.g. anti-discrimination law, and apply that to the systems that we're building in ML and AI. We also have this scale of bias working in our favor, also kind of working not in our favor. So when things go wrong, like the Trump stuff, it goes wrong at scale. And when that happens and that's publicized, you're at risk of class actions and you're at risk of a massive reputation risk. So although the scale of bias, it's a really risky place to be, it makes people have to really think about the systems that they're building. And yeah, take for example Robodebt, it's in the news this week, they're getting hefty fines. I don't know if I want the people writing my regulation to be the same people that developed that and put it into practice, and I laugh about it, but at the end of the day, people committed suicide over falsely getting targeted by Robodebt. Like, these things are serious, and you may, when you're building a system, obviously they didn't think twice about the impact, and that has resulted in like people dying and committing suicide because of that. So whether it's from the government or whether it's maybe more so like a framework, I think at the end of the day, if you're requiring or encouraging system audits, documentation, data protocols for traceability, monitoring, and diversity awareness training, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think something that we will need, and we might have a little bit more time to get this organised, but like international agreement on things like autonomous weapon as well as artificial general intelligence. Artificial general intelligence, we've probably got a little bit more time to figure that one out, but autonomous weapons are already happening. They're already killing people. And we need to, like, I listened to a podcast today, it was recommending that we have this, we treat AI the same as we treat nuclear energy. There was an international agreement before I was born. I can't remember the year or the decade, but that meant that after the devastating effects of the atomic bomb that went off in the Second World War, people really realised how serious this was and how dangerous it was, and how it was in everyone's best interest to sign this thing so that the world doesn't get obliterated. And yeah, I think if anything that we need internationally, it would be something around the more serious sci-fi side of things.
Anthony, I think I saw you perk up a little bit, and we're in your wheelhouse when we talk about regulations in Canberra and the government interactions. Any thoughts?
So I think this is one thing that's absolutely on our mind as we think through what's next for AI and even other technologies I look after, such as quantum and robotics. I think this broader question of how do we consider the ethics and principles so we do no harm, and really important about getting that balance. So a couple of years ago, we did release Australia's AI ethics principles, which are a real aim at sort of setting the goalposts for what we felt would be the responsible use of AI. But as we see greater adoption of these technologies, this is now another area where we really are thinking through what does it mean and how do we apply it. And I think the other thing we're thinking about is, does this just apply to AI, or should we also be looking at other tech more generally? And I think that's a broader question around making sure all of these emerging techs, we understand what are the potential implications and take a framework or principle-based approach, because the technology is evolving very fast. We've got to do this development very closely with the researchers, with industry as well, so we understand the implications and where the technology is trending. But coming back to what can it look like from a ethics principle, so we're doing this in a way that brings both all the community together and we're not causing social harm. And I think that social inclusion element becomes really important, though, and we've all heard stories around where decision making through AI has bias in the system. How do we look and address those things? And an example beyond just thinking about ethics, it comes back to the diversity of those working on algorithms, designing AI. How can we lift the diversity in those systems so that we actually get better outcomes through our AI capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think diversity in tech has all kinds of wonderful benefits. That's just one of them. And I think diversity in general is where innovation comes from. This is really near and dear to my heart. I've always described innovation as the collision of good ideas with other good ideas to create new things from things that already existed. And collision of ideas only helps when they're different ideas. And that's where diversity comes from. Different perspectives come from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic experiences, different cultures, different upbringing, different age, different cultural expression. And that can only help. And that's how you eliminate bias, because everybody gets to contribute. At least that's the way to get there.
Can I just add one
Please.
thing? I think it's awesome that we have frameworks in place. I think they're a really good reference point for people who want to do the right thing. I think, unfortunately, what happens with frameworks is they can be vague enough to work around really easily. They're awesome for people wanting to do the right thing, and they're a great place to start. But for the bad actors, I think what we really need is events like this. We need people in the industry who care, who give a fuck, and who really want to do things properly. And we also need, I think we're quite lucky in that AI it's not like risk. If you go home to your family and you say, yeah, I'm in risk and banking, they won't ask you any questions. If you tell them that you're in AI, they'll want to talk to you about it. Having conversations and
Sorry, risk people.
having
but it's true.
conversations and making everyone aware of the real risks that are already happening and the damage that's already been done, so that people can essentially vote with their feet. If there's a product that is not doing the right thing and using these systems in a bad way, then if people aren't using that product, then they're going to go under. So really educating everyone to know, and things like social dilemma I think was really good, because it really laid it all out, how harmful these systems can be if they're not looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, risk people. There's a lot of AI in risk, by the way. Our chairman was the founder of a Stone and Chalk resident called Daisy that deals with AI in the claims process in insurance. And there's a lot of risk assessment that is done through AI. Tracy, let's shift gears a little bit, because you work for Xero. There's no AI in Xero. We're just talking about accounting, right?
Yeah, there's a little AI in Xero. We're working really hard to increase the amount of AI in Xero. So one way that we are super fortunate when we start thinking about AI and ethical AI in Xero and linking into the conversation about automation and job loss, one way that we're really fortunate is Xero's purpose is to make life better for small businesses, their accounting partners, and their communities around the world. So when we start off on the whole AI adventure, what are we going to build? How are we going to do it? How are we going to make sure it's ethical and it helps? We have that as our guiding foundational principle. So when we think about what sort of AI applications might make life better for small businesses and their accounting partners, we think about things that might reduce toil. So rather than automating jobs, we want to give people time back so they can go up the value chain and work on really gnarly, rewarding problems. So the accountants can talk to the small businesses about how to grow and how to thrive, rather than spending hours of toil and drudgery. So examples of those kind of applications are the computer vision ones that help us ingest data from financial documents. So whether it's bank statement PDFs or quotes or bills or receipts. And then we have, to the point earlier about seeding decision making, that's something that we talk about a lot. So at the moment, we have products in market that suggest reconciliation. So core part of accounting is translating financial transactions into the accounting transactions. And we've made a really deliberate choice to suggest rather than automate. Because I think anybody in here who has any sort of accounting background knows that there are tomes of rules on this stuff, but there's also a layer of human judgment. I don't think it's the same layer of human judgment there is in medicine, but there's certainly judgment involved in accounting decisions.
There's lots of loopholes in the tax system.
But not in the medical
system. Yeah, so one of the first things we did when we were thinking about these internal applications and what we were going to build to help us with the purpose and the ethical dimension. So Xero, maybe just over a year ago now, we set up an external advisory board. And so the focus there is really helping us connect these questions to the community that they impact. So the advisory board is made up of small businesses and of accountants and of some academics and experts, and we have privacy experts in there to help the small businesses and the accountants. And they produce content to help themselves and their peer group. And a big part of that focus is to demystify this world and really think. And closing comment, one of my favourite things about the advisory board for the last year is really getting away from all the things that we might think are important in AI and really listening to what they think is important. And the real questions they're asking are much closer to questions around privacy and consent and their customers' data and what we have permission to use it for, much less about the kind of sci-fi view of AI.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And actually, I'm going to try again with the segue and see if Jeff ruins it. But based on that and the idea of listening and interacting with your audience, we'd like to take some questions and talk a little bit about what you think the future of AI is, what you think the present of AI is, or anything else you want to talk about in this topic area. Who's got a question?
When machines start teaching other machines, how does that paradigm shift? Conversation we've had today about many factors, whether it's how it's utilised in medicine, because we don't necessarily believe that they make a decision 100% of the time, and where do we think the liability sits if a human actually didn't determine the outcome of that teaching?
Look, I don't know. I guess is the answer, right? And I think even if I take a step back and I look at not even machines teaching machines, but autonomous vehicles, and if that vehicle gets in an accident, is it the driver? Is it the software engineer? Is it the AI guy? Is it the manufacturer of the car? Like, you start to get into the slippery slope of this black box of AI and these models where they're supposed to be unbiased and therefore accounting for all the data to create a model that enhances decisioning. But at the same time, then how do you decompose that to understand how that model is making that decisioning in a way that if there is an accountability component of it, whether it be a car accident, a patient dies, I get audited because Xero has messed up my accounts. Where is that liability at the moment? And then you add the layer of machines teaching machines. I've got no idea on that one. That's scary, I think, at that point, to me.
Thank you. I'll just add that unless there's a really big need for a machine teaching a machine, it might be worthwhile not having that as well. So weighing up how much you can explain what has happened versus, the kind of output that you get. And a lot of the time, the closest kind of example that I can think of that's already happening in the real world is continuous learning. Models will go out into production, and as it learns, it will shift. And that's why things like monitoring are really important. Explainability is really important, as well as deciding if you even need machine learning. Will a rules-based approach be enough? And if we're not encouraging behavior that can be monitored and explained, then machines might teach machines, and then where does the accountability lie? But the accountability should always lie with the company, in my opinion.
Oh, which one? Because they'll be fighting each other.
Zuckerberg.
Yeah, Zuckerberg, yeah. Let's just blame Mark. Other questions, other thoughts?
Well, dazed and confused are the best of times, and both of those things now, so it's a bit of a softball and a fluff question. But how far are we from the singularity? Realistic. I don't believe Elon. I think he's lying, believe it or not.
There's that great thing about exponentials. Like, day before the singularity, it looks a long way off. Sorry, no, I don't have anything useful to add. That was my...
That was a good joke.
Liberty
It was really good.
So,
Look,
opinions.
I'll say this. We are further away from sentient machines than any of us will probably ever care to think about. It will not be in our lifetimes. Sentience in a machine it's beyond the capability of even the theoretical in maths and science today. It's a great thing to talk about and think about. And there's one idiot at Google who claimed that his robot was alive and they fired him. He clearly got through the Google math test somehow, but didn't get through the street smart test. That's not a thing that's around the corner. We're still trying to make algorithms work to make the decisions we wanted to make in real time. Quantum computing is still very much in its early stages. All those things coming together also doesn't necessarily mean that some machine's going to have consciousness. So this idea that suddenly technology is going to come together in such a way that machines are going to think and feel on their own, honestly, it's almost an absurd question at this point in our time. Anybody have a different view?
No, I agree. I don't think it's an absurd question. I think it's important to still...
It's an absurdity, not an absurd
Yeah.
question. Not a stupid question. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, but I would recommend just keeping an eye on what quantum computing's doing. Once that's cracked, then we're all fucked. But not because of AI. That'll be one part of it. The other part of it is, like, all our passwords are breakable. Like, there'll be a lot of other things to worry about when that
But then we
happens.
get into machine versus machine, because what'll happen is quantum computing will start doing amazing decryption, but then you'll use a quantum computer to do amazing encryption. And then what we'll do is we'll sit back and we'll watch the quantum computers battle it out, and hopefully the good one wins, or boom. No, that's not going to happen. But yeah, there will be an arms race on encryption and decryption like we have today. It'll just be faster and we won't see it. So we'll see how that travels.
I think, and just a thought, it's a bit of a tangent, but related potentially, although maybe not, is like the thing that makes me a bit nervous today about AI is, so I'm not a PhD, I'm certainly not the sharpest tool in the shed, but that computer vision model for Roth scores and everything else we've built, that took me about, I don't know, an afternoon to put together. And so there's a lot of tools and a lot of algorithms that are out there that are incredibly accessible and incredibly commoditized. And so what makes me a bit nervous is if I can, with a harebrained idea while sitting in a hospital, go home, build something, and the next day show it's working, and with the right intentions in that case, with all these tools that exist and all these algorithms that are already out there, what makes me a bit nervous are the individuals who will seek to apply these in a manner that is creepy or invasive or just not up to scratch in terms of societal sort of standards. And that's really what kind of makes me nervous. So thinking about sort of machine teaching machines, and that's way beyond anything that my brain can comprehend or get my head around or anything. But the accessibility of all these models today, and not even what MIT is building or what the latest researchers are working on, I don't care about any of that stuff. My approach to with our customers is, what can we take that exists right now that we can build something today to show you tomorrow? And we've got good intentions, but there's a lot of people that don't. So that's really what makes me a bit nervous in terms of the world of AI today.
Excellent. I think that's probably all the time we have for questions. Yeah, I know. It was fun, wasn't it? We could do this all night. But, oh, wait, we have more. We have question. One more question from online. Gotta put my glasses on now. Well, you gave me two. Now I have to pick one. Oh, they're the same person, so that's all right. Okay, I think somebody read iRobot. Existential threats will be there because AI and ML systems will start thinking, and even they may not like to work under humans. Yeah, that's true. We're messy. Is there a way we could embed core society or human values into these AI, ML? I think that's what we've been talking about. The ethics, it's like a corollary of garbage in, garbage out. It's bias in, bias out. And that's where it starts.
It's a tough one, though, because, all right, so if I use the Facebook Zuckerberg stuff, 20 years ago, if you told me that I'd be taking pictures of my food and everywhere I go and pictures of my family and posting it online for everybody to see, I'd say you're nuts, crazy, and there's no way I'd ever do that. And now I do, right? Or a lot of people do. And so I think the definition of societal standards and value shifts so quickly that it's really hard to judge it by today's standards. Because right now, if you go into a store and they use computer vision to identify who you are and facial recognition to remember where you've been and how often you come back, that's really creepy. I don't like it. No thanks. But in 5 years, if there's value, because when you come back, they offer you an immediate discount of 20% because you're a returning customer and they know who you are and they know what you like to buy, maybe there's value. Maybe I'm okay with that. So I think societal standards is really slippery to judge today's tech on.
That's a great point. Anybody else want to comment?
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was just sorry, building on that. When we think about societal values, it comes back to events like this today. How do we start to lift how we're explaining these technologies so we understand what the value sets are? And your earlier point, Michael, around the diversity of views, and you mentioned garbage in, garbage out. So again, the more that we can work with communities, the more that we can work with those that are programming to ensure that we get the diversity across the whole spectrum of, for example, here in Australia, the Australian society. I think they're the type of things we need to keep really at front of mind as we're working with all of these type of technologies to ensure we get that balance. And I think it has to be kept at front of mind for all of these things as we go forward, because if we don't, there is a big risk there. But the positive is that if we do get it right and we look at what this opportunity is, Australia can be known as that producer of responsible and trusted AI. And I think that's something, a big benchmark that we can put a flag in and definitely deliver on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's an opportunity for Australia to get this right. So let me just say thank you and how much I appreciate you guys taking some time to have this discussion with us. Can we get a round of applause for the panel, please? I think Jeff spoke for all of us. I could do this all night, and we're going to be here for a little while, so we may continue doing that over a beer or a glass of wine. I do want to make one quick little announcement before I let you all drink. Feel free to get one, actually. KPMG and Stone and Chalk today launched a new program called the Future Technology Program, and this is really goes back to our thinking that there are untapped resources, there are skills and people in Australia who don't get the chance to contribute, and for all kinds of different reasons. And KPMG and Stone and Chalk came together and thought, how can we tap into that? How can we create more diversity and maybe some people who can't afford the programs like we're all lucky enough to have here at Stone and Chalk and other places come together? And we decided to create a scholarship fund. And KPMG and Stone and Chalk launched that called the Future Technology Program today. That just got announced while we were here, I think, right? It was pretty much while we were talking. And it's a small contribution, but it's a 3-year program at least. And 5 companies a year will be able to come into the Stone and Chalk residency program of their choice, whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, or wherever we may be in the future. And it's really an opportunity to get some additional thinking, some startups that may not have had a chance, like some of you who are here in startups now have had, or some thinking that maybe people were a little bit worried about taking a chance on coming in and getting some support. So I just want to say, keep your eyes out. There are applications going out today. The website is now updated with an application form. If you know somebody who is maybe thinking about going on a new startup or a new idea, maybe an AI or ML or not, we'd love to hear from them. And there's an opportunity for them to get an all expenses year at Stone and Chalk to help develop that idea and that project. Tell your friends, tell your family. And with that, once again, I would say thank you to the panel, but thank you all to you who came out tonight and braved the freezing cold and windy weather in Melbourne. I can finally say that being from Sydney, since I've been having to say it the other way around for about a year, it seems. But I'm really excited to have this conversation with you guys. What a great conversation with some really interesting points. And I look forward to continuing the discussion over a glass of wine as we finish the night. Thank you for joining us remotely, Anthony. And next time, we'll raise a glass together.
Sounds great. Thanks for hosting us.
Take care. And thank you all.